There we are. We are bang on time once again. Welcome, everyone. It is another Coin Bureau Clips live stream. You do not adjust your set. There are more of us than normal. Jess and I are joined by Dan, Coin Bureau's very own head of research. Dan, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to be here.
How was tell us all about your journey from Prague to Dubai.
Oh my.
Where to begin?
To be honest, I wouldn't say it was that bad getting here, but getting like from the airport anywhere else was probably the tricky part.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is just confusion on part of the people who are arriving and not knowing what to do. But of course, there's been no shortage of flooding, and some area, like especially in the conditions we were driving in, and it's literally something out of The Walking Dead, basically, with like people walking around and like buses with like flickering light inside, and like you don't know if there's people inside or not, and you're like, well, anyway. Yeah.
So if you guys haven't seen the news, Dubai has been a little bit damp over the last 24 hours or so. I think that's
just a sprinkle, just a light shower. A TLDR, guys. So you came in town for Token 2049. There's the conferences coming on this week. Thousands of people have flown into Dubai, and the heavens opened would be an understatement.
Yeah.
Hasn't it been the worst rain on record in the last 85 years? Because that's when they started recording the weather. So it could have been the worst weather of all time.
Yeah, for Dubai, certainly. Dubai has had a year and a half's worth of rainfall in 24 hours. And as Dan was talking, it has kind of been pretty sticky out there on the roads. There's, lots of flooding going on. But more importantly, there's a lot of very pissed off and grumpy crypto bros in town who are, I imagine, doing great business at hotel bars.
And they probably have very wet trainers as well.
Yeah, all their expensive trainers have probably gotten ruined. So as befits a live stream with at least 2 British people on it, we will spend quite a lot of time talking about the weather. But we will talk about some other things too. There has been quite a lot going on in crypto, and we are going to make the most of having Dan with us. Dan is not usually here in the office. For those of you who haven't encountered Dan before, I think he wins the GigaBrain prize at Coin Bureau. What Dan doesn't know about crypto probably isn't really worth knowing. So because he's in town for Token 2049, we dragged him away from his laptop onto the live stream. So Dan, we're just gonna, obviously we're gonna talk through some of the stories making the news this week in crypto, get your opinions on them. And there's a few sort of talking points I want to raise with you. I'm sure a few people will have questions in the chat as well.
Of course, yeah.
So if you don't mind us just sort of hurling questions and opinions your way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Just the one thing I'll add, it's funny you said like if it's something that Dan doesn't know, then it's not worth knowing. And the one area of crypto that I really don't know much about is NFTs. So maybe don't.
Okay, so NFT questions for Dan.
Maybe that's a bottom signal for NFTs, who knows.
Can we give a shout out to Jess's laptop as well, which has got it's kind of functioning as our sort of microphone rig.
It's not little rabbit fluffy tails. It's actually microphones, so you can hear Guy and Dan equally excellently. So make the most of it. Ask some questions to Dan below.
Okay. And thank you everyone for joining us. We've got people joining us from South Carolina, from Charlotte, North Carolina, from where else are you joining us? A lot of people from South Carolina. Everyone's from South Carolina. Okay, well. And some regular people as well. Oxford Row Coach went to Pete McCormack's Bitcoin conference in Bedford last week. I forgot to read out a comment about that. Sunny Bedford.
Sunny Bedford.
Was it sunny? Really? So that sounded like it was a pretty good event. It had a good lineup. That's for sure. So thanks for letting us know. I'm sure it was a good one. And we might talk about Real Bedford at some point, because the Winklevoss twins have just invested in that. So I think it's Champions League fixtures tonight, but maybe in future years, Real Bedford may be among those. Okay, good. You're telling me where you're all watching from. Northern Ireland, International Space Station. Okay, Croatia, Plymouth, UK, the proper original one, and not South Carolina. From India, from Vietnam, from Australia, Tasmania, Puglia, Italy, from Maine, again from North Carolina, from Blacksburg, Virginia, from India, from the Netherlands, from the Philippines, from Florida, from Inglewood, California, from Dallas, Texas. A lot of Americans today. It's a bit early for you guys. From Brazil, from South Africa, from Abu Dhabi. I hope you've managed to keep dry, sir. from sunny Nassau, Bahamas. Very nice. Perth, Australia. We're really sort of both sides of the globe here, aren't we?
Sorry, I have to stop there because we have done NFA Live quite a few times. You are obviously the starting guy. There is Ben's Haircut is an NFA commenter. I've just seen another account, which is Guy's Beard. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see. Where is Guy's Beard?
Guy's Beard is in the channel. I just saw you guys comment. The beard's coming back.
The beard's coming
and
back.
The beard's
Don't
back.
worry. Don't worry. I had to shave to do one of our sort of inserts. You know, we do inserts for the deals page. So I had to shave to look the part for one of those. But don't worry. As you can see, the beard is on its way back. I haven't got rid of it just because, you know, it's not a market signal or anything like that. From Penrith, glorious Penrith, and from all around the world. Fantastic. Okay, so we've talked a bit about Dubai. We'll come back to Dubai.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of other people will after the last couple of days. But let's leave that aside. Let's first talk about the halving. The Bitcoin halving. The halving, I should say. Who keeps calling it halving?
I don't know.
Where did that word come from?
I think that was from the last Bitcoin halving. I don't know why, like that time specifically, it was halving. It's interesting that like the term kind of disappeared. I think it was just like because at the time it was a lot of like, you know, retail, irrational, whatever, you know, lots more retail attention back in those days. I think that could actually be the explanation.
Okay.
So there's a lot more retail because of course that's the one thing people can tell now by like altcoin underperformance that there isn't much retail around. So people just saying it is the habit, this is just the halving. And everyone's like, okay, you know, because it's just there's mature people mostly. I mean, meme coins aside, there's mature people around.
We've got to start getting the terminology right, folks. If we want people to take us seriously, we can't have these differences in terminology. It's the halving. It's not the halvening. Okay, I'm gonna die on this hill. I promise. Okay, so the halving is 19th or 20th of April, so a couple of days away at most.
19th, 2 days and 8 hours away.
Okay.
Coming very soon.
Okay, so the halving, obviously, you guys all know how that works. The block reward gets cut in half. Bitcoin's issuance inflation gets cut in half. Bybit, the crypto exchange, is just released a report. It's predicting that supplies of BTC on exchanges could run out by January if these ETF inflows hold up. And obviously, if that happens, if the supply gets constricted, if people can't get their hands on it, there's only one way the price is going to go. So, Dan, what do you think about that? Do you see these ETF inflows holding up for one thing?
I think, to be honest, I think it depends a lot on like the macro conditions, because we can see now, like especially over the last week or two, that everyone's under the impression that like Bitcoin is it's a store of value like gold or whatever. But recently we've seen it behave more like a risk asset. So long as that's the case, something I try to also like remind myself is all these big inflows can become outflows just as easily under the right conditions. And fortunately, we have not had like any crazy condition where it's really had people kind of like for lack of a better term, like puke out their like ETF positions. That still hasn't happened yet. But I think that when that test comes, I think recent price action and outflows have shown that, they're not just going to be hodling, be like, all right, time to double down. They're going to be like, I already made 2x, man. Like my clients are happy on that here. Although like there's some evidence to suggest that it's all like retail, at least according to this Van Eck, that 90% of the inflows are retail. Which is kind of weird because it's like you would think that retail would have access to Bitcoin directly, but anyway, probably like tax optimization stuff and who knows. Yeah. What. But anyway, I guess long story short is I think the ETF flows depend on a lot on just like the macro stuff. So I don't think there's any guarantee that they'll hold up. And if we do see kind of like into the summer, especially leading up to the U.S. election, I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and that'll probably shake things up a bit. And we could see I guess more of what we're seeing now, but like maybe a little bit more pronounced going into the election. Yeah.
Just how diamond-handed are these spot ETF buyers, or are they paper-handed like Jess and Toncoin? I couldn't resist. So yeah, as Dan says, macro factors are going to play a big role. There's no shortage of them, is there? And now we can throw the Dubai weather. Does that count as a macro factor, or is that more crypto specific?
Crypto sentiment. Crypto sentiment, crypto Twitter sentiment is way down.
Yes, there are a lot. We've seen and heard lots of jokes about Dubai liquidity and positions being underwater over the past 24 hours. I think we have to put a stop to that right now. Okay, so We'll give you another 5 minutes. You can have another 5 minutes of making jokes about liquidity in Dubai, and then that's it. We have to call a moratorium on it. Yes, so going back to this report that Bybit said, if these ETF inflows hold up, and that is a big if, as Dan said, now the ETFs seem to be averaging around $500 million per day of inflows, according to this report. That's approximately 7.1k BTC per day. And the report says there's a little under 2 million BTC left on exchanges, which is the lowest level in 3 years. So if those ETF inflows hold up, obviously the halving, cutting that issuance in half, then Bybit reckons that we could see exchanges start to run out of BTC by January. But presumably that would be reflected in the price a long time before that actually happened.
Yeah, and you have to remember also that there's other sources of supply that are like potentially untapped. Like, for example, the U.S. government still holds quite a bit of Bitcoin. Yeah. Foreign governments, I know there's a few. I can't remember. I think there's like some weird, like, I don't know, like Norway or one of these Scandinavian countries like holds like some odd amount of Bitcoin. I think the UK holds quite a bit. I would imagine that like even Chinese government is as a consequence of like Bitcoin mining happening there. I'm sure they have a few Bitcoins between the pillows, so to speak. And I think also to remember that once the price does like start to shoot up, then you would see more supply kind of being unlocked. I don't know. I think it's not that straightforward. And even something as simple as some of you guys might remember, James Howells, like this guy who lost his Bitcoin in the landfill.
Yeah.
Like if the Bitcoin price does get to a point, it's going to be like, look, like we're going to go digging for this dude's Bitcoin, so that we can stick it in an ETF. Just like, I guess just to be aware of the fact that it's not just the supply like that you see, or like the supply that's coming from the miners, but it's also other stuff that's just been kind of in the background, like whether it's like government BTC holdings or what have you. Yeah, just like to be aware of that. And it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just it'll kind of like prolong, I guess, like it might not be, let's say if Bybit's thesis is correct, it might not be like 6 months or whatever it is, or 9 months. It could be like a year. You know what I mean? So it could be a little bit prolonged because you'll be like, oh yeah, right. We forgot about the U.S. government Bitcoin, of course, or the what is it? This exchange that went under Mt. Gox, or like, oh, we forgot about the Mt. Gox Bitcoin going back on the market. I forgot. My bad, guys.
Yeah. There's some, and you occasionally hear. I mean, there was something earlier this week, I think, a Bitcoin wallet that had mined, I think it was 50 BTC years ago, suddenly woke up and started sending it to exchanges. So there are like probably a lot of BTC holders out there who have been pretty quiet, just sitting on big gains.
And a quick note on that, actually, I think it's something I mentioned to you guys well before, that I do think that a lot of these like early Ethereum, Bitcoin, like Ethereum wallets and Bitcoin wallets that are like waking up and sending stuff, I do think that it actually could be like some some wealthy Chinese people who are undergoing like financial, because you guys all know the Chinese economy isn't looking too hot. I mean, there's like some evidence, I guess, that it's like picking back up, if you believe those numbers, of course. But I imagine there's quite a few like wealthy Chinese people that maybe invested in in Ethereum or Bitcoin, or mined some Bitcoin like back in the day, and they're like they just lost all their like real estate portfolio, and they're like, crap, like I have all this debt I need to pay back, like, and they're going and looking through like what can I sell, it's like, oh yeah, I have like this Bitcoin, and like I have this like Ethereum or whatever. So I think, and if you actually line up the time when these old wallets started sending like moving crypto around, it actually lines up quite nicely with when China started experiencing financial stress. So that's like one potential explanation. It might not be it, but I think that's the most likely. Occam's razor. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so it's only going to get more interesting. Once we're sort of past the halving, it's just going to be more and more interesting to see as that price goes up, just who comes into the market to sell. Like, exactly. Who's got diamond hands, and who has set their price targets at 100K, 150K, whatever it may be. Okay, Jess, what else are we going to be talking about?
So we have a few more Bitcoin kind of hints and tips to mention. We're also going to talk about Pavel, the Telegram founder, because there's some interesting findings there. Recent interview with Tucker Carlson. Maybe before that, Dan, I'm curious, because we obviously got the halving in 2 days. We've just seen that Bitcoin dominance has hit a 3-year high. 53%. Oh, you've done the face. What's the face?
Yeah. No, just because I like continue, and then I'll explain. Yeah.
So what are you expecting over the next few days? Is it something that you would say?
I think it's going to be like, so it's something, of course, I asked you before we went live. I said, can you pull up the chart for Tether's for USDT's market cap? Because, and everyone thinks, oh, you know, like Tether's printing or whatever. But when Tether is printing like this 1 billion or whatever, like this big amount, it means that someone somewhere like really wants to like leverage trade, either like go short or go long. And anyone who's like listening and like uses like a, you know, if any of you watching are like do like leverage trading, like what's the first thing you do is like, okay, I want to like, you know, short Bitcoin. What do? You go and you buy USDT. So like logically that creates demand for USDT. Yeah. And this is where like, you know, this big billion, and that probably means that there's like some few whales somewhere that like, you know, we want to really short, we want to really go long or whatever. And if you actually look at USDT's supply over the last year, you can see that it's recently kind of like, it's gone like vertical, like even just over like the last couple of weeks. And you're really looking at this and you're like, how sustainable? Yeah, you're like, how sustainable is that? And like, you know, if you look historically, like even before, you can see that Tether did actually like keep climbing there, but it does kind of tell you that there's a lot of leverage building up in the, like in terms of trading. And of course, most of that is related to Bitcoin. And then the reason why I was kind of like cringing in terms of like the dominance thing is that people forget, again, like the effect of the spot Bitcoin ETFs has been super profound. And I think it's really kind of like warped, kind of like, you know, like gravity or whatever, right? Like it's kind of like warped this indicator where you're like, wow, like the Bitcoin dominance is rising and like it means everything's going to crash. And it's like, well, you can actually, you know, how much of that can be explained by the spot Bitcoin ETF buys? I honestly don't know. Like I haven't done like the math on it, but I'm sure that you could find that most of that deviation is due to the spot Bitcoin ETFs, plus the fact that there still isn't that much retail interest. And I think the retail interest is due to just like, you know, like economic conditions not being as good. You know, we're not in the same place we were at the beginning of the pandemic with like governments bailing out checks. And, you know, that'll probably come eventually where like this loose financial stuff, like liquidity and all that stuff. But I think that we're still kind of in the early innings and there's still not much retail interest. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm like rambling on that. But long story short, Jessica, for the next few days, I think it's going to be pretty volatile. But the fact that everyone seems to be betting so aggressively on like whether it's going to go up or down, as I was mentioning to you, is like the most frustrating outcome would be that just Bitcoin just trades sideways within a range, and then like the bulls and the bears are just like, well, what the hell, like nothing, you know, it didn't go my way, and then like. And I think that would be the most frustrating. What's interesting is if you even look, I'm sorry to go on a tangent again, but if you pull up Bitcoin on the weekly chart and then go look at the kind of price action we're seeing now and compare it to like the first top of like the 2021 cycle, like in like early 2021, and you'll notice it's the same thing. It's like multiple weeks of like this like big green candle and then red candle, and then it looks like it's going to explode, and then it doesn't, but then it's like red candle, but it's like like your classic distribution pattern. I think that's what we're seeing now. How long will that last? I don't know, but I suspect it's going to last a little bit longer. Just because of like the halving and like all this stuff after, and I'm sure we're going to get big announcements out of Dubai, and then like the Fed meeting happening at the end of the month. Like there's a whole bunch of things that can move, have this prices chopping in a range that like that bulls and bears are like, damn it, like I want my, you know, where's the 80K or where's like the 50K, right? Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
I think people in crypto find it often hardest to deal with prices when they're chopping sideways. People need that extreme action. If it's up, down, or whatever, but please God, not sideways. Well, you were talking about Tether's market cap there, USDT's market cap, and USDC's has climbed quite a lot as well, which I think, as you were saying earlier, indicates that there's actually quite a lot happening in DeFi and Ethereum's ecosystem.
Exactly. So that's actually a really interesting thing, I guess, on two fronts. Is of course now, so historically speaking, USDC's primary demand driver was like leverage in DeFi, which basically like, you know, you take Ethereum, you put it as, you know, in like Aave or whatever, and then you'd borrow USDC against it, and then you use that USDC to buy like I don't know, like a meme coin or like more Ethereum, you know, if you're super bullish on Ethereum. But similarly to like, you know, when you're thinking, okay, like I'm going to go leverage trade, I have to buy USDT. It's the same thing. Like, okay, I'm going to borrow against my ETH. What am I going to do? I'm going to borrow USDC. And so that also creates demand for USDC. And the fact you see the market cap rising is a sign that there's increasing leverage within the DeFi ecosystem, which if you think about it, actually makes a little bit of sense with all this like restaking and all this crazy stuff, right? But what's interesting is that historically, Ethereum's price is heavily correlated to DeFi leverage. And what's interesting, of course, is that Ethereum's price has kind of been lagging. So you could make the argument potentially that the fact that ETH's price is lagging, but the DeFi leverage in theory is going up, that means that like ETH's price is going to catch up to that at some point. And I think we're potentially seeing early signs of that on like shorter term time frame charts and whatever. But it's something I've been saying now, I think like for weeks, and it just hasn't happened. So
still hasn't happened.
Maybe after the halving, maybe that'll finally be the thing that's like, okay, guys, like, can we please move on to Ethereum and everything else? And like, you know, Solana can do its own thing in the corner.
When is it going to be Ethereum's turn? I know a lot of people are asking that. Okay, Jess, should we talk about Pavel?
Let's do it. So Pavel Durov, who is the founder of Telegram, is a big holder in
Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
Toncoin?
You called it. Toncoin, yes. Bitcoin also. So he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. What's really interesting about this is Toncoin and Telegram has really been thrown into the limelight in the past, let's say 6 weeks to 8 weeks. I know we spoke about it a lot on the news as market recaps and given a run through of possibly why Telegram and Toncoin is in the limelight, because Telegram might go public, and obviously that could see a lot of utility for Toncoin. And Pavel was someone that really didn't do a lot of press interviews. So I think 2017 was his last public media appearance on record until recently. When this news came out, he started having a lot more time that he's investing in talks. And on a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, he was saying just how much of a big BTC holder he is. And I've got several $100 million in BTC and also in fiat. And it was really interesting to have a little look at some of the quotations that he said. So he was saying that he has a few $100 million in his bank account, and he had Bitcoin 10 years ago, and he hasn't moved them since. And he points out, because Pavel is, I think, a libertarian, freedom is the biggest tool and asset that you can have. So he was saying, real estate as investments is not something that's interesting to him. Even purchasing a private jet might actually restrict your time and also your distractions. And this is why BTC,
that's what I found.
I know. That completely aligns with us, Pavel. How did you guess? And this is why he's zeroing in only on BTC and fiat. And it just gives an underline of how in times of geopolitical uncertainty, the biggest freedom tool that you can have is Bitcoin. And it's a pretty bullish narrative to roll out with.
Yeah. And he's also been talking about in this Tucker Carlson interview, it's worth a watch, isn't it? It's a good watch.
Mm-hmm.
But he was saying, the increasing amounts of government surveillance in the world, he thinks that kind of along in the same way that we have hardware wallets for crypto, we could be about to get sort of secure communication devices that kind of work in the same way, that are designed not in this case to facilitate sort of person-to-person transfers, but rather peer-to-peer communication that governments presumably can't listen into. And he claimed in this interview that the FBI had approached people who worked or Telegram insiders, to try and get them to install, was it spyware, or kind of via a back door, which is pretty damn scary.
And that's why he was steering away from having the company headquarters in San Francisco. And he was saying UAE is somewhere that's geopolitically a lot more neutral, and that's why he's come here and set up shop here.
Yeah.
So it is worth a listen. I do agree. It's a very interesting one indeed.
Yeah. And obviously the place to find that is on Twitter, which is where Tucker Carlson lives now.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a very good, and it was quite surprising, wasn't it? Because as you say, Jess, Pavel Durov is not someone you generally hear all that much from.
That being said, this week is Token 2049, and Pavel actually has a talk with the CEO of Tether, Paolo.
Oh, yeah.
And there is an announcement. So that'll be on Friday, I believe. So I'm sure next week on the live stream, we can give a little run through of what was coming out on the announcement. We'll give it a listen.
And if you're and I'll do a shameless plug here. And if you're a member of the Coin Bureau Club, you might actually have a sense of what the announcement might be about, because I think we had mentioned I forget if it was in our Toncoin review or in the Tron, it might have been a bit of both, that there is some very interesting dynamics, let's say, going on there behind the scenes between Tether and Toncoin, and you guys can look into that if you haven't already. It's but I mean, I guess you'll find out in a few days anyway. So
well, it will be fascinating to see, because that is a big sort of moment for Token 2049. That is two big kind of names in this space. What are they cooking up? Okay, Jess, what's next on the agenda?
So BlackRock, we're going to talk about some of the spot Bitcoin ETFs, because it's not like we don't talk about them enough on a once a week Wednesday live check-in. So BlackRock's IBIT spot ETF could be due to flip GBTC by the end of this month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So GBTC, which is Grayscale, still leads the way by just over 2 billion, 2.3 billion US dollars, but that is half of what it was just a week ago. So it really shows the ramp up of outflows from Grayscale and also the inflows from the likes of BlackRock, which is going to be quite an interesting kind of a potential flip.
Yeah, I mean, turn it to me.
What have you got to say, Dan?
Yeah. I think the most important thing to remember is that, when this asset managers like BlackRock and the Bitcoin ETF, it's not BlackRock itself that's investing in it. They're just providing the vehicle, and then there's other investors who are investing in it. And because BlackRock is so big and so reputable, and like iShares and what have you, like, I believe it's like one of the biggest or the biggest ETF issuer or something.
Mm.
So they have like that track record. So naturally, like any new funds are going to kind of gravitate to that, unless they don't already know about like Vanek or these other guys. So I wouldn't necessarily read too much into it. The thing, of course, that is I think the biggest takeaway is that BlackRock approved this at all, and I think that this ties into something that's actually really interesting. And we will probably be doing a video about this actually, like a spoiler, like in the next few weeks. But if you read like some of the like Larry Fink every single year, he does like a letter for investors, and he does a letter to like the CEOs of the companies that BlackRock is invested in. And that's basically how BlackRock kind of like controls things, because BlackRock has a huge stake in these companies. And then he basically says he's like, look, like, this is what you guys are going to do, and then it happens everywhere, right? But the more in a way, like the more interesting one is the letter to the investors, because that really shows Larry Fink's and BlackRock's incentive, like their reasoning for like why they're approving like these certain things and doing things a certain way. And it's actually really like it's kind of like it's kind of like this like almost like a video game kind of like a lore type of thing, where the whole reason he seems to be doing it is because he understands that he's managing trillions of dollars of mainly I guess like people's pensions or whatever. And he's just like, look, like we have to make sure that these people get their pensions. We have to make that number go up somehow. So I have to like, whether it's like ESG or whatever, or I guess in this case, crypto, is like, I have to have something that will like kind of like pump up, for lack of a better term, like his own bags, so that his clients are happy and that they can retire and whatever. And I do think it's like, look, like it's almost like a weird, like there was one particular paragraph of one of the investor letters where it literally sounds like he's like saying like, you don't understand, like I have to do this like crazy borderline dystopian stuff. This is the only way that the prices will go up. And then, if we don't do this, then like everyone loses their pension basically in the US, which is like, that's not exactly what he said, but that's kind of like what I gleaned from him. Like, damn, like that's probably a tough place to be in, but I do think that he, anyway, intentions aside, but going on a tangent there.
Pensions are something I don't think people watching have tuned in to hear us talk about pensions for a long period of time. So I'll keep it kind of brief. But like pensions is an interesting thing, because it seems to be like, certainly this is the case in the UK, and I think a lot of other countries as well. That is a real ticking time bomb financially, because the populations are declining in so many countries, especially in developed countries. And so in a few years' time, we're going to have a heck of a lot of old people all wanting to claim the pension that they're entitled to, and not enough young people doing the work to actually generate the generate the GDP in order to fund these pensions.
And Guy, that actually reminds me of something really interesting, and anyone watching can like look this up. I'm pretty sure it was either Australia or New Zealand. So during the pandemic, when like everything, shit hit the fan, excuse my French, but all that stuff happened. Of course, all the government started providing all the stimulus. If memory serves, it was either Australia or New Zealand that instead of saying, here, we're going to give you money, they said, you are allowed to withdraw up to X amount of your pension, basically of your own money that you put into the system, you can now take back out. Because of course, in most countries, I imagine it's like this in the UK, but in Canada, like you basically put into the pension, you only get it once you're of age, and you're not able to take that money out earlier. But what was really interesting is in Australia, they said, actually, we do have the money, and you can actually take some of it out earlier instead of us having to basically print more money, which was really interesting. And it really makes you think that like, other countries didn't do that. And I think it's because the money just isn't there, like you're saying, guys. Like it's already been like gambled away on some like derivative debt.
I think there was a similar thing in the UK a few years ago where they experimented with allowing people to withdraw the money.
Didn't go well.
And it did not go well. They spent it like immediately, because I think in a lot of cases they had to, they had to buy a property or get medical cover or care or whatever it was. So in a lot of cases they didn't have any choice, but I'm sure a lot of them just kind of spent it very unwisely. But and now it's like, shit, we've got a massive great gap we have to plug.
I mean, we're all gonna be working for a long time.
Hope you guys are ready for that. Well, we're all going to make it big on the bull run, so we'll be all right. Just for anyone who's joined us in the last few minutes and is wondering why there are three of us, we are joined today by Dan, our head of research, Coin Bureau's resident gigabrain. So we are using the opportunity to pick his brains on pretty much everything. So that's why there's three of us today. And people very much enjoying you in the comments, Dan.
Oh, that's nice.
This guy's good. This guy speaks very quickly.
I think that's my two favorite comments ever in like in these live streams is one is like, this guy's too fast, I don't like him. And then the other, like one other guy just comments, rap god. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take that one. You know, like
this is true. We should have added a little beat, giving you a microphone, some sunglasses, and this is the longest album track ever.
Yeah, lots of Dan. You're going to have to come back on one of these very soon. But yeah, the reason Dan speaks so quickly, by the way, folks, is because he does so much research, which involves watching, lots of videos, interviews with founders and stuff. In order to save time, you watch it. What speed do you watch it on?
2x. Depending on the topic, sometimes I'll download the video so I can put it into like VLC Media Player and watch it on like 3x, or like even like crank it, like literally up to the limit where it's like your brain can't even process the words. But that's yeah.
So Dan watches so much content at such quick speed that he now speaks as fast as that. That's literally it.
And I honestly think it's very efficient in terms of time, not just in terms of listening, but in terms of the speaking too. It's like, I can explain a concept that, if you're just listening on normal speed to like any regular like macro podcast or interview, you're just like, God, like just get to the point. But in my case, it's like, it's going so fast. You're like, Jesus, like, let me catch up here. But it's just, hopefully I speak just slow enough that, most people can keep up. But anyways.
You'll have to watch it back. You can watch the live stream back later. Can you watch it on 0.5 speed?
Yeah, 0.5 speed.
Yeah, maybe 0.75 as well. If you're like having a little bit of a day, you've not had your coffee yet, you're still waking up. You can also slow it down. YouTube cadence for everyone.
Okay, so Dan, well, before I want to talk to you guys about DePIN, because Dan shared a fascinating thesis on DePIN with our Coin Bureau Club members earlier today, actually. But before that, Jess, what's next to talk about before we get to Dan and DePIN?
So actually, it's just an outlook on the market. So I think we can just go straight in with DePIN.
Okay, because we've kind of covered the market. Well, actually, can I just check, where is BT? Because we were so busy looking at USDT's market cap.
I've seen a few of you in the comments say that Bitcoin is crashing and the markets are crashing. Guys, I would say $62,000 a Bitcoin. It's still a little okay.
I know people just love the drama of it. Okay, so DePIN. This is the narrative that we've talked a lot about. I first got really sort of bullish on DePIN when we covered Masari's DePIN report. That was a few months ago, wasn't it?
A while back.
And they made some really good points. We made a video all about that. So DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure networks. This is obviously a narrative that a lot of people are talking about now. It's one that's gaining a lot of traction. There are some fascinating projects building in it. And I think one of the things that this Masari report said, and that I've repeated a lot, kind of ad nauseum really, is that one of the reasons I think that DePIN could be big is because there isn't so much of a financial angle, which is going to, in theory, keep regulators away from it. And regulators like the SEC currently have their sights set on things like DeFi, having just gone after Uniswap. They're obviously, as you pointed out earlier, Dan, when we were talking off camera, which many people forget, they're still going after Binance and Coinbase. Those cases aren't finished yet. But yeah, so earlier today, Dan shared a research feed piece with our Coin Bureau Club members, and he had a different kind of take on DePIN. So Dan, can you give us the kind of TLDR of that, and whether are you bullish or bearish on DePIN to start with?
Like definitely 100% bullish. And I think I'll start with, I guess, tying in. I think it was in this Masari report that you're citing. If memory serves, that was the one where they basically said, look, like this is something that can actually generate revenue. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of like the biggest problem in crypto is that all these like awesome crypto projects, but then you have like these TradFi guys, right? They'll come and analyze. They're like, what the hell? Like this thing has like a 1 million price to earnings ratio or whatever, formula they use, EBITDA or whatever, terms they have to like describe the discrepancy between, like the fundamentals and like the value of the project. But the thing with DePIN is that it actually does have the potential to be like, wait, like this can actually, like really disrupt like a lot of the established players. And like you were saying, Guy, of course, it's something that's not really necessarily related to finance. And I think that, that people are really, or like regulators are really keen to, or like, let me put it this way, like all the regulators that are focused on crypto are very, very oriented towards finance. So stuff like DePIN, I imagine is like more likely to kind of like, I don't want to say like slip through the cracks, but kind of, it's like, imagine you're the SEC, you get like, someone puts Uniswap on your desk versus, I don't know, like Helium. You're like, well, I'd probably rather go after Uniswap because it actually like, hurts the bottom line of like, some of my biggest backers. Whereas like Helium, it's like, peer-to-peer and they're working with T-Mobile. I was like, why should I care? You're like, okay, let them go do their thing. And the next thing it's like, wow, it's actually very big, but it's not like it's not violating any law. It's like they can't really point to something and be like, look, it's doing something. It's like, you know,
how dare they decentralize the internet?
Yeah. But that's I guess that's one thing. But then in terms of the thesis, this thing that I posted in the research feed. So of course we've reviewed a few DePIN projects, small cap, kind of like DePIN gems in the, you know, some gems more than others. But for the subscription service, for our Coin Bureau Club members. But what's really interesting is I noticed that like a lot of these do seem to be kind of connected to like, or have a history of like working with government and stuff. And I think the most obvious example being, I think we had covered it recently.
Sentinel?
No, the one that we did.
Hivemapper.
Yeah. That if you actually look at, like, Hivemapper is actually a crazy one. Like where you look at like before they kind of like did the whole dash cam thing, they were actually working with drones, and you can actually find a presentation on YouTube of the CEO. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's literally presenting and saying, yeah, like, you know, like basically with these drones, like you can, you know, like map everything that's going on. And we have like, you know, military clients and like government clients or whatever. He just kind of like, you know, set it on like passing, but it's like, whoa, what did you say? Like, you know, like this is the product that like that who prefers? Yeah, this is the product that like our, you know, our government and military contractors prefer. It's like, excuse me. And then they switched to doing the dash cam thing. And I guess not to give too many spoilers, but of course the official story is that like drones, like, you know, they're not that efficient, and like they weren't able to collect much data, or like because like the battery life is limited or whatever. But then in another interview he says like, yeah, like actually the issue with the drones is that we couldn't get like a good sight on like, you know, like these kind of like alleyways and like nooks and crannies or whatever. It's like, I don't think the average driver, like, you know, regular user, even institutional user, is going to care about what's in an alleyway, but a government or you know, military probably will, especially if it's in like, you know, in the middle of some other country that they're interested in. But anyway, I guess what I'm starting to notice that with some of these DePIN projects is I do think that there is a little bit of a push, or even like a support, like of, you know, whether it's like US government or even like European Union or what have you, where like they understand that in many of these Western countries, like the infrastructure is very like massively like underdeveloped. And the question is like, how do you build something like that out when you're missing, you know, you basically like hollowed out your like manufacturing sector, and you don't have the people to actually like make all this infrastructure. It's like, well, you could almost like in a weird way like decentralize it, where each guy's just going to have like this little, instead of building like a massive, I don't know, like a 5G tower that's going to require all this expertise or whatever, you could just have like hundreds of dudes just like, you know, these nerds just like putting together their own thing, or buying it for like, you know, $50, and then like setting it up and then having a network that way, instead of having like a big tower that, you know, takes money. And I mean, I'm simplifying things a lot, but you have to understand that like DePIN is it's physical infrastructure. It's literally physical infrastructure. It's like, it's electricity. It's even like the airflow, like in this building. It's like your cellular, mobile. It's like, you know, you could maybe say like even like traffic management and stuff like that. But all of like a lot of these technologies that a lot of these Western, I guess you could say like Western countries are falling behind, and countries like China has been like really advancing in. These, like, there's almost like an incentive. It's like, hey, like instead of, as a very simple example, like China wants to roll out a 5G network. The way they do it is they say, you will implement this 5G and it's over. You know what I mean? And like, but you can't really do that in like the United States. You can't say like, we, like as a government, we're going to tell you have to do this. But what you can do is like call up some VCs and be like, hey, like we really want to roll out 5G. We don't know what's going to like, you know, kick people in the like butt to do it. It's like, okay, well, why don't we spin up, you know, like some crypto project that's going to do like 5G and like have all these people buy, and they're going to make some money. And at the same time, we just, oh, look, we magically created a 5G network that's now integrated with like all our biggest telecom companies, and we're competitive with China again. Like, look, would you look at that? You know, like it's just, and again, it's not something I'm 100% certain of, but just the more that I dig into these DePIN projects, the more I realize like, wait a minute, I see what you're doing here. Like, you know, you're not able to exert the same kind of like command and control economy, like especially around this infrastructure. So you're basically creating incentives, you know, I guess you could say in a very American way, to create like the financial incentives to actually incentivize regular people to like set it up themselves. And it saves the government work, saves the companies work. And like at the end of the day, like I guess theoretically everyone's happy so long as it works, right?
So basically kind of like outsourcing infrastructure development to the public.
Rather
than not just the private sector, but the public.
With kind of like private sector incentives, basically. And if you think like literally, if you think about the way that many of these DePIN projects are pitched, it's like you become like I think World Mobile has this slogan where it's like you become like a telecom company, like you are individually like yourself like a telecom operator or whatever. And like and so so basically like what you said is like you're really like you're turning each person into like basically like a mini company, and like creating basically this network that for whatever reason is just unable to be done in the US, or I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
kind of fumbling my words here now. But.
Yeah. Well, because I see a lot of people mentioning projects like World Mobile in the comments. And I mean, I guess, World Mobile is big in places like Zanzibar, for instance, where, the government doesn't really have the wherewithal to put in that kind of infrastructure. But, the company comes in and does it, and then the people do it themselves. And I mean, it's been pretty successful in those areas where it's kind of set up.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's, I guess, a lot of if a government like the US government, which is, really, really powerful and rich, if they can't implement these sort of networks, or if they haven't got the resources to do it, then you can bet that, a government in a developing country isn't going to be able to. So it kind of makes sense, whatever the state of the economy, unless it's like, as you say, one of these countries like China, where they're able to just sort of implement, get stuff done kind of like that. We often, at the moment, Britain's kind of trying to build a high-speed rail network, a high-speed rail link between London and like Birmingham and Manchester and stuff. And it's taken years and cost billions. And like, I think in that time, like China has built 100 times that length of railroad. And it's absolutely crazy. But then China, just says, let's get it done, and it gets done.
Someone needs to create a decentralized railway in the UK and solve this ASAP. I don't know if anyone has any ideas,
Yeah.
But it's a good point, because you've reviewed plenty of DePIN projects and looked into them. Is there anything you can advise for us and people that are watching that are looking at investing in DePIN projects as potential, red flags or cause for question marks?
I was gonna say, I'll start with like the more positive.
Okay, we'll start with the positive. We'll start with the good ones.
Like I would say the same as almost every other crypto, and that's mainly like you want a narrative that the average person can understand, like something like, it's like a decentralized, like decentralized internet or decentralized Wi-Fi, decentralized whatever. Like people understand that, but if you're saying like it's a decentralized, like neuron spectrator or whatever, like some like weird, like something that's very niche and like maybe like cars use it, like you don't really understand, what I mean? Like, so that's one thing. And then in terms of the red flags. I think it's hard to say, because the red flags can also kind of be like a benefit. I think the biggest thing that I've seen, honestly, with the DePIN projects that should be red flags, that they're extremely centralized. It's like, and I've explained this to Guy, I think, on a couple of occasions, like a lot of these, without naming names, like a lot of these DePIN projects, like you could remove the token and everything would work fine. And it's like you just stuck the token in there for no reason. Maybe someone wants to just get rich in the middle of it, right? Mm-hmm. But that's kind of like the one thing to think about is, like that a lot of these DePIN projects are basically like traditional, like let's say telecom giants that just like someone slapped a token on top of it. And at any time, like that token could disappear and the company would still be there. And so you have to, I guess that would be like the biggest red flag, is to understand the relationship in terms of the incentives between the token and then the actual entity behind. Because like typically, for example, like in a crypto project, like a proof of stake, the incentives are kind of aligned in the sense that like the value, for example, like a proof of stake token, the token has to keep like a value in order for the network to stay secure. But this is not the case for like one of these like DePIN projects that is just like some utility token that's like on another blockchain. Like that token could go to zero and then it doesn't matter for them. But you might remember, Guy, in our recent, I guess, upcoming review of HiveMapper. Did we already put? No, it's
well, we're still putting it together.
Another little
being edited.
Another little spoiler there that's really interesting in HiveMapper's case, actually, that the incentives, at least in my opinion, seem to be a little bit more aligned there, where the value of the token, there needs to be some value to the token to actually incentivize people to drive around and collect the data, and so that this data can basically then be sold by like HiveMapper, the company then basically takes this data and sells it to other companies. But for HiveMapper, the company, to actually have this data, the token needs to have a value. You know what I mean? And this is not the case for a lot of these other DePIN. So in that sense, I think that the incentives are, so that's an example of like where the incentives are aligned well. And I'm not going to give an example where like they're not aligned well, but basically looking to just ask yourself, it's like, if this token disappeared overnight, would this significantly change how this DePIN project worked? If the answer is no, then you might actually see some underperformance, or at the very least, like the incentive to actually do stuff to support the token's price is not going to be as strong. Whereas in something like HiveMapper's case, like, you'll see in the video that like, that let's just say that like there's a very strong incentive for them to keep that price at like some minimal level so that people are incentivized to drive around and collect the data that the company needs to sell to its clients. Right.
Yeah.
And without that data, they don't have clients and it all kind of like falls apart. Right.
Yeah.
So it's so that's like a positive, I guess you could say, like flywheel. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry for that.
Lots of people want your thoughts on all sorts of other narratives as well. People asking for your thoughts on I think RWA is the one that's getting a lot of opinion in the chat.
Only because of BlackRock. If BlackRock had never put that BIDL thing on Ethereum, there would be no comments about like I forget who it was that made this very good observation that BlackRock putting this biddle on Ethereum was more of kind of like, okay, let's like dip our toes in the water and see like how it's going. Like you don't know, maybe they'll say, actually, you know what, we don't like this, we're going to do our own private thing. And I do think that many of these RWAs, like the biggest ones, will all be on like private permission chains. And I think the regulations have a lot of catching up to do. It doesn't mean that these, like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that these cryptos will do well. Like Ondo Finance, I guess, is like the elephant in the room. That's the one that's been pumping a lot. Everyone's like going crazy about it. But the thing is that, you know, you have to understand that, right? Like now the SEC is like slowly inching its way into like DeFi, and like RWAs is really something where it's like, okay, yeah, they're doing KYC and whitelisting and whatever, but it's like, but it's just, and again, I'm not well versed enough in like the specifics of like securities regulations to know for sure, but it just doesn't feel like kind of like normal that I can just like do like a very quick, very simple KYC and then all of a sudden have access to all this stuff. Whereas like in a regular process, if I'm like, if I wanted to invest in a tokenized bond versus like an actual bond using a stockbroker, the process for like the stockbrokers is a lot more rigorous from what I've seen. And I'm sure that there's some RWAs that are not like that. But and then it's just like, then how much are they really, are they kind of like going a little bit too off the line there, and are they opening themselves up to some like regulatory scrutiny? And then on the flip side, you can make the argument that the regulators will do nothing because they want people to invest in the government debt. Especially in the US. So they're, they might just say like, oh, well, we're not seeing anything, as long as you're doing some minimal KYC, and like, who cares if there's a few North Koreans on there, like buying, so long as it's keeping the interest rates down.
Yeah. I mean, I think the potential of RWA is kind of real world assets. It's kind of clear for people to see, like the idea of being able to tokenize kind of anything really is a really, is a good one. It's a nice one to entertain, but you do sort of wonder, well, certainly I wonder whether the actual specifics of it are really going to be that simple.
Yeah, and you know what? Sorry to interrupt, guy. You know what it reminds me of? If you guys might remember from the last cycle, I think it was even the one before, like supply chain, right? Like supply chain tracking. It has that feel to it where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have like all this QR codes and track and whatever, but it's like, but there's just a natural disconnect between what's on chain and what's in reality. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, then like I track this thing on supply chain, but for all the guy just like switched the boxes around and now it's invalid, right? So it's just one of those tricky things. And a similar thing with like this tokenized real world assets. It's like, what do I even hold? And people are starting to find that with like, like stuff like carbon credits, where it's like, wait a minute, like I bought this thing, but what was actually backing this credit? It's the same thing. Like you're going to run into the same issue. And I think, there's going to be a few like blow ups before people, I guess find like a good, maybe there's some assets that it works with like better than others. Maybe they'll just start. I think the best thing, honestly, would just be to start issuing stocks natively on chain. Just like forget making a tokenized stock. That's so dumb. Just issue it on chain as a token. Just bite the bullet and accept that that's where things are going, and just save like this hassle of all this infrastructure, and like it's just weighing everything down basically. Anyway. Yeah,
a good comment from Peter Robinson saying supply chain tracking was a huge false narrative. I kind of agree, or certainly it was a narrative that didn't quite, like you say, Dan. It was a kind of nice idea, but it didn't quite take off. I think it may have been you as well who said at some point, this is going back ages, but like there's so much grift in the supply chain system. There are so many people kind of skimming off the top at various stages of the process.
Yeah.
Like no one actually in that industry really wants it to be cleaned up because they're all making an absolute mint from that process.
So that's a very I mean, I guess you kind of summarized it there, but that's the thing is like you go into even something like real like tokenized stocks, for example. You go into it assuming that the people who are offering these products want things to be more efficient and whatever, when in reality maybe there are like some and again, this is into like market structure of like traditional stuff that I don't fully understand, but I know that there's like basically that the way that these market makers can process transactions, so they can take a little bit of percentage here and there. And if you put that on chain and then like that removes their ability to do it, like what's the incentive for them to actually put it on chain? Same thing, like I guess, in like you were saying, Guy, in this case with supply chains is like, you say, oh, like we're going to, do supply chain tracking and everything's going to be very efficient. But ask yourself how many billions or maybe even trillions of dollars of like black market supply chain stuff is going on behind the scenes, and how rich people are getting. And I think a really simple example I'll use, and sorry to go on another tangent, but is like computer repairs, right? If supply chain tracking was completely perfect, and those of you who follow guys like Louis Rossmann and these guys, you'll know that if the supply chain tracking was perfect, there would be no extra parts to actually do computer repairs, because these companies they want you to come and buy another product. So the only, like, especially with modern devices like modern iPhones and stuff, the only reason you're able to actually repair them is because there's a factory somewhere, I don't know, in like Vietnam or in China or wherever, where the guy who actually runs the factory is like writing down in a sheet that he made like 100,000 units when he made 110,000, and he's selling the 10,000, you know, under the table to all these repair shops, and who will be able to like put it together and actually make a profit, and everyone's happy, including the consumer, because they're able to like repair their thing instead of having to buy a new one. So you have to think about like, you know, like what are the actual incentives at play, and it's just, you can really go down like rabbit holes there, of course. But
yeah. Cool. Gosh, there's so many exciting narratives that have already sort of come and gone, a bit like supply chain tracking and Internet of Things, and now being replaced by things like real world assets and DePIN.
Yeah.
And it's going to be fascinating to see which ones are, Jess, which ones are you most bullish on? What's your bullish narrative for this?
So I'm a DePIN girl. I think DePIN is I'm a DePIN girly. So Peak are hosting an event tomorrow. We had a live stream with Peak on our Discord a few weeks ago. And I'll be speaking at this event, speaking to some of the ecosystems that Peak are incorporated with. And I'm super excited to hear from them what they have to say. The team are in Dubai. And then also World Mobile. I'm a holder of World Mobile tokens. And I think that's a really interesting narrative too. Something that, as you've explained very well, and it's why I think projects like Chili's did very well in 2021. If you can explain it to someone without using the words cryptocurrency or blockchain in one sentence, and they can understand it, and they are not in crypto, you've got yourself an interesting business model to invest in.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. And speaking of Chili's, I keep seeing various fan tokens popping up now in, you know, the top gainers and top losers list that they do on CoinGecko every day.
I think PSG fan token was, let me have a look. I think it was.
I think PSG fan token pumped because PSG beat Barcelona or something in the Champions League. But it's I find that one kind of fascinating in a way, these kind of fan tokens, because on the one hand, they seem sort of, you know, you think, well, there's such kind of limited interest for these things. But on the other hand, they have that ready-made thing of a community, don't they? Like a passionate community.
Yes, a passionate community, a narrative when it comes to, you know, being able to vote on the color of the t-shirts, being able to vote on what music you want to have come out, supporting a team when you don't live near the fan stadium. Yeah.
And I mean, I think, you know, it's something that can be, there's so much that, you know, there are so many sports teams. There are so many people that follow sport in some way. You know, if you're not interested in football, you might be interested in something else. So maybe but again, that seems to be a narrative that was sort of very much a last cycle one.
I mean, in terms of Chili's, like in sports tokens and stuff specifically, that's like a whole very fascinating rabbit hole. I'll keep it short, and I'll say, like, anyone, if you can remember, read a book called it's called The Fix by Declan Hill. And it basically goes into like the inner workings of like all these big soccer leagues, and let's just say that it's not completely, everything is super clean in there. And I do think that a lot of these fan tokens is basically just like an extension. And to be fair, like there is like some benefits it brings back to these clubs and stuff like that, like no question. But I do think it's kind of ultimately an extension of kind of like just like basically gambling on like sports. It's basically like sports betting in like a slightly different form. That's maybe a little bit more productive and more actually like, I guess you could say like wholesome. But I do think it has its roots, and just read The Fix by Declan Hill as a Canadian journalist. It's a very, very interesting book. Like it's easily one of the best books I've ever read. Okay. But if you're into football, it'll like, you know, European football, like kicking soccer soccer for the Americans out there. If you're really into that, I think you're going to be very disappointed. So maybe don't read that book.
Okay. It's fascinating though, because like FIFA, which is the football world governing body, and UEFA, which sort of governs European football, are both like so corrupt. It's just ridiculous. Like the stuff those guys get up to, like the amount of grift going on is just crazy. Okay, so we're getting towards the end. We've pretty much talked about all we wanted to discuss today, all we've got time for. So I'm going to go through a few of your comments. Dan, according to Gary, you sound like you're on Glaswegian speed. Dan sounds just like Glaswegian speed.
What is Glaswegian?
As a half Glasgow girl, you know, it's a Glasgow accent, but speaking fast.
Oh, really?
On speed.
Okay, well,
on speed.
Yeah, I'll take that as a compliment.
A Ouija on speed. That's quite something to see. And Jess, Music by Six says, I know you like a weather update guy. It's cloudy but mild in the Quantox right now, and then there's just a collection of vowels and consonants.
Bwrw glaw Cymru. Oh, Yachivi. It's raining in Wales. Sorry, guys. Here.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I thought that was Vietnamese. I was like, just speaking Vietnamese? What?
I love how many people comment in Welsh. It makes my heart so happy.
I'm just amazed how many people out there speak Welsh. We are gaining traction with the Welsh crypto community.
What can I say?
One of the most powerful out there. And yes, I want to remind you guys once again that the Gigabrain who has joined Jess and I today is none other than Dan, our head of research, who is in Dubai. He was in a very. It's looking like no, it's quite sunny now. But
we had us for a second though.
Yeah, it's raining again. Yeah, so Token 2049, the big crypto industry shindig, is happening this week. All the crypto bros have been flying in for it, and as you might have seen on the news, it's been absolutely chaotic. Dan, you managed to get here. You had a relatively unscathed journey.
Yeah, and I was actually going to mention earlier, if anyone watching this is like, is in the process of coming to Dubai or considering coming to Dubai, and you're worried about like, the flooded roads and whatever, or make sure that you book a Tesla, because the main thing that's been basically killing the cars that are driving through the water is obviously like you have like a literal engine with like exhaust and everything, and when the water gets in there, again, I'm not like a car guy, you can probably tell, but like the petrol cars just get absolutely wrecked. But the electric, like we were in the Tesla, and the dude's like, yeah, I'm just going to turn off the vent for the AC. I'm going to roll down the windows. And we're just literally like a frog in water, just going through, like some fairly deep water. And like, I mean, didn't leak into the car or whatever. And he was even saying he was driving with the water. I mean, you guys have seen these videos like out of San Francisco or whatever, videos that went viral where the guy's like basically functionally he's underwater in a Tesla. But because it's like it's fairly airtight, doesn't have any exhaust. It's just like a battery inside. It's just like a little frog that just goes through the water, and so you'll be completely fine. But don't, if a guy comes to you and is like, yeah, look, I got this like really low riding, especially if you have like one of your crypto bro friends pick you up in like a low riding some sports car. Like we saw a lot of those that were stuck in the water. So
yeah,
don't do that.
Yeah, I saw a very low slung Ferrari being loaded onto a tow truck yesterday.
Do we have a photo from Twitter? Maybe we can show one of the guys.
A
little screen grab. So for those of you that haven't seen on crypto Twitter the extent of what we're talking about, we're not being dramatic. This is actually quite an apocalyptic storm that took place this week, and there was quite severe flooding.
It was absolutely wild, and this would have absolutely nothing to do with crypto were it not the fact that it's Dubai and the fact that it's Token 2049 in a few days. And yeah, the mood on crypto Twitter, people are very crypto bros haven't taken it well, have they? No. I think a lot of pairs of very expensive trainers have been wrecked this week. Let me just find that. Other one. Yeah, it's been absolutely. It's crazy.
I didn't see that. That's in the metro.
Yeah.
More Emirates had water leaking in to it. There was one photo of a taxi where the taxi is completely submerged. You can barely make out the roof because it's driven into a flood puddle. So it's crazy. So stay safe out there, guys.
The craziest thing was landing in the airport and seeing like even in like the tunnel that you get to, like the parts of the roof had fallen off and whatever, like from the storm. Like it was pretty nuts. Yeah.
Wow.
It was not
so. I should say though, it is a beautiful sunny day now. It's just there are a few puddles about still. So we will be at Token 2049 tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I am hopefully going to be speaking to someone fairly important there. Obviously you guys, but almost as important as Jess and Dan. So hopefully have something to share with you there very soon. And we'll be, I think, at Token on the Friday as well.
Correct.
If the one in Singapore was anything to go by, there is going to be so much to see, so many people to talk to. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be great fun.
Yeah, and if you guys are not following us yet on socials, especially Instagram in particular, do make sure to do so, because that's where we'll be sharing our content in as close to real time as possible. So if you don't make it over to Dubai, then you'll get to relive it through us. And if you are in Dubai, then hopefully we'll catch you there. Come and say hi to us. We'll be patrolling the expo floor.
Yeah. If you are, like Jess says, if you are at Token 2049 and you see some of the Coin Bureau team, come and give us some love, so to speak, because because a few team members are still inbound. I think they were stuck on their plane for quite a long time. Yeah. So some of them are really going to need a hug, I think. Anyway, that's about it for today, folks. Thank you for joining us for another live stream. Dan, thanks so much, man. It's been great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Hope to do it again soon. Maybe tomorrow's NFA.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah,
are we
well,
gonna
if we have to?
if we're able to do NFA?
we're-
I'm still kind of weighing that one up.
I mean, it
But,
is token 2049, so
yeah.
But we'll
Yeah.
have to get you back, Dan, even if it's virtually via Skype, via
virtually
Zoom.
by Skype.
We'll pick your brains.
Who uses Skype these days? Jeez.
Yeah, a surprising
Strange.
amount of people, and it doesn't work very well, does
It
it?
doesn't work very well, true.
No. Okay, guys, it's been great to see you. Thank you as ever for joining. We will be back next week, if not before. So thank you for watching, and see you again soon. Adios. Okay, and we are